Abortion is a hard one. I am very strongly pro-life. I've taken a pro-life position all my life. Having said that, I hate it when the government ever tells people what they can and can't do with their own bodies, with their personal choices in life. I hate that. So it's a hard one for me. But I am staunchly pro-life and will vote pro-life. This issue is super divisive for America, always has been. There are tons of euphemisms that both sides use, but in particular, the pro-choice, the left, they love to use euphemisms. A euphemism is a word that softens the blow of what it is that we're talking about, makes it sound less extreme or radical or harsh. So, for example, it's not a baby, it's an embryo or a fetus, or fetal tissue is even worse. They're not killing a baby, they're terminating a pregnancy. And, I often hear the term reproductive health, which is very ironic because, at least if we're talking about the baby's health, there is nothing healthy about getting terminated or killed inside the mother. And reproductive health, abortion is all about preventing somebody from reproducing or from being reproductive, stopping reproduction. So I would call it anti-reproductive, and it's certainly not health, it's death. But having said that, I could say in a sense that I am pro-choice because I'm in favor of the baby's choice. And if that little baby girl inside the mama chooses to not continue to live, then so be it. But if the baby does choose to live and to be born, far be it from us to circumvent or hinder that decision. So in that sense, I'm pro-choice. Often I hear the argument that a woman should have the right to do whatever she wants to with her own body, which is true. The question is whether the baby inside of her is part of her own body. I can do whatever I want with my own body, but I can't pick up a hammer and go and smack my neighbor in the head, even though I'm using my body to do it, because I'm violating somebody else's rights. I'm doing something to somebody else's body. And if a mama terminates her pregnancy, if she kills the baby inside of her, she's doing something to somebody else's body. It's no longer just about her own body. So to me, that argument does not really hold water. And the baby or the fetus inside of the mother is very different from the mom. It has distinct DNA, separate from the mother's DNA. The baby, let's call it a baby girl, she has separate consciousness and awareness, separate from the mother. Different brain. She has independent sensory awareness. She can feel things and sense things that her mother can't, and vice versa. She has different hair color, different eye color, different skin tone. Her hormonal system is distinct from that of her mother. She has a different blood type from her mother. Her fingerprints are unique and different from those of her mom. Of course, her brain is different. She has different thoughts and emotions. Her heartbeat is different. Her pulse is at a different rate from that of her mother. And she can have independent survivability as early as 23 weeks before before the mother comes due. She can survive as early as 23 weeks before the mother comes due. The Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade took place, I think, in 2022. It was a landmark case, throwing it back to the states, and there were tons of doomsday predictions and naysayers who said this is going to throw us back into the dark ages and cause back alley abortions and all kinds of difficulty for women. Interestingly, from then till now, the number of abortions every year in America has actually increased. Not so much because of the Dobbs decision, but because of the way women are performing abortions. There are telehealth at-home abortions that women can now perform up to a certain point. And many, many of the abortions that perform today are that kind, that variety, where they consult with a doctor or an expert over the computer and then self-administer different medications. There are pro-life considerations that we ought to think about as well in this whole debate. Many people who are pro-life say that life begins at conception. And one thing that's very ironic to me is that people who claim to be pro-life are often the very same people who are staunchly in favor of the death penalty. Because that obviously is not pro-life, that's pro-death. And I understand their reasons for it, but it is ironic, is it not, that when it comes to little babies that are unborn, that are harmless and helpless, they're very pro-life. When it comes to criminals on death row, they say, kill the guy. Be that as it may, if life begins at conception, and if we're going to argue that because life begins at conception, this person, as soon as the person is conceived, is an American citizen, has the right of citizenship, is a person with the full rights that all of us who are born have, then there are some logical consequences that follow from that, which are untenable and which I'm sure nobody sustains or agrees with, but they pose a philosophical problem. Particularly, I mentioned capital punishment or the death penalty. The death penalty is imposed in most cases when it's considered first-degree murder or premeditated murder, murder in cold blood. And accomplices to that murder often sometimes are given the death penalty. If abortion is murder, and if aborting a newly conceived, right after the connection between the egg and the sperm, if that little tiny conceived life is destroyed, and if that is considered murder, we would have to argue that that is premeditated, cold-blooded, first-degree murder, and therefore it must be a capital offense. And so anybody who's consistent philosophically, I think, would have to agree that the mother, perhaps the husband, certainly the medical professionals involved, should all be put to death if they abort a baby, even a first trimester baby. Obviously, nobody's really in favor of that position, but I would say that's a logical inconsistency. So it can't be that newly conceived babies and terminating those pregnancies is equal to a crime punishable by death. So how severe or serious of a crime is it? Very hard to say, very difficult to say. I'm really glad that the Supreme Court said that states should decide that and debate that. And it's okay with me that different states will have different ideas about how serious or grave that particular infraction is. I would rather win this debate through persuasion and debate and argument rather than forcing half the nation to adopt my viewpoint, which is how it was for 50 plus years under Roe versus Wade, a very, very bad precedent. For me, if it's a case of rape or incest, or the mother's life is in severe danger, or there are extreme birth defects for the baby, in any of those cases, I would lean towards allowing the mother and the family and the doctor to carefully make their own considerate decision as to what they should do medically with the baby. In all other cases, it should be state law, but I would support a state law that would say that abortion should be illegal. Anyway, I'm very sensitive to those on the other side of the issue as well.